My Best Friends Live in the Woods. The Adventures of Albert by Anne Michelle Moracek. Chapter 16. Shadow Force. Prinelopy sighed and stared into the small, broken piece of mirror she kept in her secret treasure stash. She had a collection of curious this and that's, souvenirs of her imaginary adventures, that she kept in a hollow she had dug next to her nest. It was covered over with dried grass and tiny twigs to conceal it from the other mice. Her usual cheerful self was feeling as gloomy as the gray sky that morning. A couple of other mice had decided to target her with insults and even pushed her into a mud puddle in front of Chad.
Ooh, it looks like the Queen of Corn has been tending the pigs. They laughed meanly. Piggy Prinelopy! Piggy Prinelopy! They chanted over and over. Poor Prinelopy had run to the stream to bathe, and mostly to cry. Now, as she gazed into the piece of mirror, a tear rolled down her cheek. She had hoped to be pretty in front of Chad. She liked Chad. He was the only other mouse that would play pretend with her. It wasn't that she disliked her everyday life on the forest floor. To the contrary, she really enjoyed the cool, mossy earth and a cozy nest. She enjoyed gathering nuts and seeds and grasses to store up for the winter. But her mind would see a particular twisted tree root, and it would magically become the dragon named Shadow Force. Before she knew it, she was perched on top the root, riding Shadow Force as she swooped and looped across the sky. She would call to Chad, "Hang on, I'll take you for a ride. Shadow Force and I are off to the land of the elves." And Chad would jump on the tree root behind her and yell enthusiastically, "Wahoo! Go as fast as you can, Shadow Force. The elves need us to bring provisions for the winter." The two mice friends would laugh and lean to the right and lean to the left as they imagined their dragon steeds swirling and looping through the air. It was great fun. So, why did the other mice torment her so for having a vivid imagination? Hadn't she shared the corn she found? "It's not fair," she pouted. As she studied her reflection, she wondered if her whiskers were long and silky enough, or her gray fur was shiny enough for Chad to ever think she was pretty. But more importantly, she wondered if Chad would still like her and be her friend after Piggy Prinelopy ordeal. She sighed again and returned her tiny piece of mirror to its hiding place. She wiped her tear-streaked cheeks and tried to bolster herself. "Maybe I'll go looking for wild strawberries today," she said out loud, but was just talking to herself. "Great idea!" A boisterous Chad suddenly right behind her. "You scared me," Prinelopy said wide-eyed. "Oh, sorry, but it's still a great idea. I'll help you look for wild strawberries." Chad smiled. "Are you sure you want to be seen with me?" Prinelopy felt the hurtful taunting again as she looked down ashamed. "Are you kidding?" Chad was amazed she could even ask such a question. "I always want to be with you. You're my best friend." He was smiling ear to ear and held out his hand to her. "What about Piggy Prinelopy?" She was still not convinced. "Oh, that? Don't pay any attention to those idiots. They're just jealous of you," he assured her. "Really?" Prinelopy's black eyes were still wet with tears. "Of course," Chad smiled. "So, who are we today?" Chad asked. "Queen of the Corn? Dragon Rider?" "I'm just plain old Prinelopy, I guess." She sighed. "Impossible!" Chad laughed. "There is nothing plain or old about my best friend. Now take my hand and off we go."
Chad grinned. The instant Penelope reached out and took his hand, she felt like lightning flash between them. Suddenly, all his energy and admiration flowed into her, and she was transformed. Her face lit up with joy.
Now that's more like it.
Chad was happy to have her joyful spirit back.
I know. Penelope was back to herself again. Let's follow the little white butterflies. If the strawberries are blooming, they will lead us right to them,
she said as the two friends scampered off.
Great,
Chad agreed.
We could pretend we're butterflies,
he offered.
Oh, fun!
Penelope was already seeing herself with wings.
My wings are purple,
she said, waving her arms about as if they truly had purple wings attached.
Well, mine are orange,
Chad said as he started waving his arms. They scampered along till they came upon a soft gray dove, slowly walking along, pecking for bugs, bobbing her head up and down as she went.
Well, what are you two doing flapping your arms like that?
She cocked her head to one side and winked at the two little mice.
We're butterflies,
Penelope answered cheerfully.
My wings are purple,
she said with a giggle.
Mine are orange,
Chad offered. Well, where are you two butterflies off to this fine day? The dove inquired with another bob of her head.
We're looking for wild strawberries,
Chad explained.
But we haven't found any yet. Do you know where they're growing?
He asked. The dove thought for a moment, then smiled. I have an idea. You are tiny, and I think if you could hang on tight, I could give you a ride. You could look down as I fly and spot the red berries from above. Are you brave enough to fly? She challenged the two. Without hesitation, Penelope replied,
We are the riders of the dragon Shadow Force. We know how to be brave and hang on tight.
Well, all right then, the dove cooed. Shadow Force, you say? I like that name. Is there really a dragon in the forest? She winked at Chad.
Oh, we just play pretend,
Penelope said, looking down at her toes with a worried expression. She was half expecting the dove to start taunting her. Chad saw her mood darken and chimed in.
Penelope is a mouse of great imagination. It's wonderful,
he declared proudly. Did you make up the name Shadow Force? The dove asked Penelope.
Yes, it just came to me.
Well, it's wonderful, the dove cooed. My name is Anne. It means grace, which is nice, but it doesn't always fit me. Doves are supposed to always be calm and pretty, but deep inside I have more fire and spirit. Would you mind if I called myself Shadow Force? She bobbed her head and looked straight at Penelope.
Oh, that would be splendid!
Penelope jumped about in a happy dance.
Chad, think of it! We are actually going to fly on Shadow Force.
Wow, yeah! Chad was thrilled as she was. Climb on and get 2 fistfuls of feathers and hang on. The Dragon Dove Shadow Force is about to embark on the great strawberry hunt. It actually took more effort than the dove had expected. She strained under the weight, but her sturdy wings finally caught enough air under them, and off they flew up into the light blue of a clearing sky. It was so amazing that 2 tiny mice could hardly remember to breathe. Their little fingers were clutching on so tight their knuckles turned white. just when Penelope was thinking the reality of this was probably more than she had bargained for, Shadow Force the dove called back to them. "Look ahead to the left. I see red spots. Let's go check it out." And before either mouse could respond, their whiskers were blowing back in the wind with a swooping dive. "Wahoo!" Chad let out a yell. "This is amazing!" As they descended, they could see a huge patch of wild strawberries growing at the clearing's edge near one of the trickling streams that led down to the river. It was a low spot that seemed moist with a dappled light. "Well, there you go, strawberries," Shadow Force the dove said as she landed. The little mice let go and slid down onto the moist earth. "Wow! Wow!" was all Chad could say. Penelope sat with her mouth open and her eyes wide. "Wow, indeed!" she finally managed. She turned to Anne and stroked her neck. "Thank you, lovely dove, for an amazing ride." The dove bobbed her head and cooed. "Shadow Force at your service." "Can you find your way back home from here?" she asked.
"Oh, yes, we'll just follow the stream,"
Chad said confidently. "Good. We really didn't go very far," the dove cooed. "If you ever need Shadow Force again, just call out to any bird you see, and they will start the calling chain. Word will get to me." And with that, Anne, now Shadow Force, flew off.
"I'm hungry,"
Chad said.
"That flying works up an appetite."
"Good thing we are in a strawberry patch," Penelope smiled. They scampered into the lovely twining vines. The berries were tiny, but the perfect size to fit in little mouse hands. Penelope plucked a small leaf and placed its round, frilly edge on top her head for a bonnet.
"That looks pretty on you,"
Chad admired.
"You look pretty."
Penelope was so happy she felt pretty. They each ate 5 berries, which was quite a lot for a mouse, then lay down on their backs to rest in the cool moss nearby.
"How did you come up with the name Shadow Force?"
Chad asked after a bit.
"I was just thinking one afternoon how us mice seem to live in the shadows. We like it best when we're not seen, but inside my heart, I feel like I have a strong life force just the same."
Penelope looked dreamily up at the clouds rolling across the sky they had just a while ago been a part of.
"You are the most amazing mouse in all the world."
Chad rolled on his side to look at her.
"Do you think we'll ever ride Shadow Force again?"
Chad asked.
"Oh, yes, of course."
Penelope stood up.
"Now, how are we going to get some of these berries home?"
She put her hands on her hips in determination. Chad was still staring at Penelope.
"Oh, yes, right, berries."
He stood up.
"How about I make a sled with poles, and we fill it and drag home the whole lot,"
he said with gusto.
"And we're not gonna share with the others either," he added on a serious note. "If they're gonna tease and be mean, they don't deserve a share."
Penelope started to protest, but Chad put his hand up.
"No, I'm serious. No one talks to my girl like that." He set his jaw.
Penelope brushed a hand across her whiskers and smiled. The two built a little sled out of long iris leaves they threaded together with dried vines and attached a stick pole to either side. Then they went about picking the strawberry harvest and piling them on top the sled.
"We shouldn't take them all,"
Penelope cautioned.
"More will grow,"
Chad shrugged.
"Even so,"
Penelope said. So they left a few, just in case someone else had a greater need. Then off they went, each holding a stick pole and dragging their harvest behind. Occasionally a berry would roll off, and they would stop and scramble back to retrieve it. When at last they made it back to Prinelopy's nest, the sun was low and orange.
Look, your favorite color.
Prinelopy pointed to the sky. Chad smiled. As they piled the berries into the food stash Penelope had been carefully preparing for winter, Chad reminded her, "Remember, no sharing."
I've been thinking about that,
Penelope said quietly.
I felt bad about taking all that corn from Mother Skunk, she continued. It seems to me that a thank you is in order.
Chad raised an ear and wiggled his whiskers. "Oh, really?" He was intrigued. "What did you have in mind?"
You know I love to bake, she said,
with a sparkle in her black eyes.
I've quite a lot of wheat seed. Perhaps if you could make a little fire, I could mix up some strawberry muffins. And tonight, after Mother Skunk is asleep, we could take a couple of muffins with a note and leave them for her. What do you think?
"I think you never cease to amaze me," Chad smiled. "I'll gather some twigs and start your fire." And so a long day turned into a long night. Penelope loved to bake. She had the cutest little red oven mitts you ever saw. She put on her yellow apron over her head and tied the ribbons in back and got to work mixing her batter. She had flour in her whiskers and all over her hands and up to her elbows. Chad laughed at how cute she looked, all covered in flour and mixing with determination. She had an acorn top. She had poked a small hole into the bottom. She filled it with sand, and it slowly poured through into a bowl below. When all the sand had emptied into the bowl, she clapped her hands and declared, "They're done baking." She put on her red mitts and pulled the muffin tray away from the fire. While the muffins cooled, Penelope used a charcoal stick from the fire to write a tiny note on the back of a dried leaf. "Ready?" Chad asked. "Ready," Penelope said as she took off her red mitts and hung up her apron. And so, gift in hand, the two mice scampered their way toward the cave. As they approached, the moonlight glowed softly on the pine wreath that graced the front door. The wild roses planted on either side smelled lovely. "How will we get in?" Chad studied the door. "It's shut."
"Yes, but the window never is."
Penelope pointed to the left at a small crack in the window frame.
"It misfits its opening, leaving a small gap between the rock of the cave and the sill. It's just big enough."
Penelope smiled and winked. Sure enough, they were able to squeeze through, Chad passing the gift to Penelope's outstretched hands. "Where should we leave it?" Chad looked around the quiet moonlit kitchen.
"By the teapot, of course."
Penelope smiled. They placed their gift, then scampered back, squeezed through the window frame gap, then laughed all the way home. As usual, Mother Skunk was the first up next morning. There was a bit of an early chill in the air. "What I need is a nice cup of tea," she thought, as she shuffled toward the kitchen. About halfway to the teapot, she stopped still and gazed in wonder. There were tiny, smudged footprints of flour on the floor leading toward her teapot. "How peculiar," she thought, then spotted two tiny muffins sitting on a leaf. "What?" she exclaimed out loud. Picking up the leaf, the word scratched in charcoal said, "Tanks for corn." Mother Skunk laughed and tiptoed to the great moss bed. She wiggled Albert's toe to wake him, and with a huge grin whispered, "Albert, you need to come see this." Chapter 16, Shadow Force, Discussion and Questions, Bullying, Self-Image, and Gratitude. Each of us is unique. We express ourselves in different ways, yet each of us feel the need to be accepted in a group. The mean mice bully Prinelopy for being different. They see her as other, rather than accepting her into us. Question 1. Why is bullying never acceptable? Question 2. Why is it important to accept others and value them for their uniqueness? Question 3. Did Chad let the opinions of others influence his relationship with Prinelopy? Question 4. How does Chad's steadfast approval and appreciation of Prinelopy affect her bruised self-image? Question 5. Why does the name Shadow Force appeal to both Anne the Dove and Prinelopy? Even though Prinelopy has been hurt by the selfish taunting of others, it is still in her nature to be loving and giving. Question 6. How does Prinelopy show her gratitude toward Mother Skunk?
I am the composer and performer for all the music in this video. Both audio recordings and the printed scores are available on mybestfriendsliveinthe.woods.com. I will provide the link below. The painted illustrations are also my creation. Prints are available on mybestfriendsliveinthe.woods.com. This is a novel. The chapters are meant to be heard in the order in which they were written. And while each chapter can stand alone, they do build as new characters are introduced and past events are referred to. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. The chapters are numbered, so if you're just joining us, be sure to go back and watch from Chapter 1